Commander Daniel Hayes stood alone on the bridge of the Earth vessel, Horizon's edge, and watched the stars blur past the viewport as they traveled through hyperspace at impossible speeds that would have seemed like magic to his ancestors just 200 years ago. He was a man of average height with weathered features that spoke of decades spent in the cold void between distant worlds, and at 42 years old, he had seen more alien civilizations than most humans would encounter in 10 lifetimes of exploration and discovery. The transmission came without any warning at all, Commander Hayes, said Lieutenant Maria Santos as her dark eyes stayed fixed on her console with growing concern. We are receiving a priority signal from the Galactic Concord, and it is addressed specifically to you, by name. Daniel frowned deeply at this unexpected news, because the Galactic Concord was the governing body of over 300 alien species, and humanity had only been a provisional member for the past 18 years since first contact with the Valkyrie Scouts near Jupiter Direct Communications. Two individual human officers were virtually unheard of in all that time. Put it through to the main display, Daniel ordered calmly. The holographic display flickered to life in front of him and revealed the elongated face of a Valkyrie ambassador whose species had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves and hunting with stone tools. The Valkyrie were ancient beings with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed with bioluminescent blue light that seemed to hold the wisdom of countless millennia. Commander Daniel Hayes of Earth. The ambassador spoke in a voice that was melodic yet cold as the vacuum of space itself. You have been selected for a great and terrible honor that no human has ever faced before. Daniel felt his muscles tense, but he showed nothing on his face. As he waited for the ambassador to continue speaking, the Kravath Empire has issued a formal challenge under Article 7 of the Concord's founding charter. The Valkyrie continued without emotion. Daniel felt his stomach tighten because he knew exactly what Article 7 meant, and the implications were staggering beyond measure. Article 7 was the ancient provision that allowed disputes between species to be settled through single combat between chosen champions, and it was considered an archaic practice from a more brutal age that was rarely invoked in modern times. What is the nature of this challenge? Daniel asked in a steady voice. That betrayed none of his growing concern. The Kravath claim that humanity's expansion into the Orion Spur violates their ancestral territory that they claim to have held for over 10,000 years. The ambassador explained. They demand satisfaction through trial by combat between champions, and their terms are absolute. Lieutenant Santos gasped audibly behind Daniel, but he did not turn to look at her. Tell me the exact terms, Daniel demanded. There. Champion will face yours in single combat with no weapons and no armor. The ambassador said, should humanity lose this challenge, then your species will be expelled from the Galactic Concord immediately and forbidden from expanding beyond your own solar system for the next 1,000 years. The weight of those words hung in the recycled air of the bridge like a physical presence that pressed down on everyone present. Such terms would effectively end humanity's future among the stars and condemn billions of people to a prison made of empty space around a single yellow sun. And if we win? Daniel asked. The ambassador's glowing blue eyes seemed to intensify with something that might have been curiosity or perhaps amusement at the very idea. Then the Kravath will cede all claims to the Orion Spur permanently and pay reparations to Earth for 100 standard cycles. The Valkyrie said, but Commander Hayes, you should know something very important before you make any decision. I am listening. The Kravath have never lost a challenge in over 2,000 years of Concord history. The ambassador continued. Their current champion is called Zorkin, and he has personally defeated warriors from 47 different species in single combat. Daniel remained silent as the ambassador went on. The Kravath evolved on a world with twice the gravity of Earth, and their biology makes them natural warriors without equal. The ambassador said, Zorkin stands 8 feet tall and weighs over 400 pounds of pure muscle, and chitin and his exoskeleton can withstand plasma fire that would vaporize human flesh in an instant. I understand, Daniel said simply. No human has ever faced a Kravith in combat. The Valkyrie said, no one in the Concord expects humanity to survive this challenge, and many believe this is simply the end of your species as a spacefaring civilization. Lieutenant Santos stepped forward with tears forming in her eyes, but Daniel held up his hand to stop her from speaking. How long do we have to respond? Daniel asked. The Concord requires an answer within 1 standard day. The ambassador replied, if no champion comes forward, then humanity will be considered to have forfeited, and the terms of defeat will be applied immediately. Daniel was silent for a long moment as he stared at the stars beyond the viewport and thought about Earth and all the humans who had worked so hard to reach those distant lights. He thought about his grandmother, who had told him stories of the first moon landing and how she had cried with joy watching it on a tiny television screen. He thought about his daughter back on Earth, who dreamed of one day commanding her own starship and exploring worlds that no human had ever seen. He thought about the billions of people who would never know the stars if he walked away from this moment. Tell them I accept, Daniel said at last. The ambassador's expression did not change, but something flickered in those ancient glowing eyes. You understand that this decision cannot be reversed? The Valkyrie asked. Once you accept, you must face Zorkin in combat, and there will be no negotiation and no appeal. I understand completely, and you understand that every analysis suggests you will die in this arena within minutes of the combat beginning? Daniel turned to face the holographic image directly, and when he spoke, his voice carried the quiet certainty of a man who had made peace with his choice. I understand that everyone has already decided how this ends, Daniel said, but I also understand something that the Kravith and the Concord do not know about humans. And what is that, Commander Hayes? We have a very long history of doing impossible things, Daniel replied. We walked on our moon just 60 years after we learned to fly, and we reached other stars just 200 years after that. And every step of the way someone told us it could not be done. The ambassador was silent. Tell the Kravith that their challenge is accepted, Daniel continued. Tell them that humanity sends Commander Daniel Hayes as our champion, and tell them that we do not intend to lose. The transmission ended, and the bridge fell into complete silence. Lieutenant Santos approached Daniel with a mixture of fear and admiration on her face. Commander, she said softly, what you just did was either the bravest thing I have ever seen or the most foolish. Daniel turned to her, and for the first time he allowed himself a small smile. In my experience, Lieutenant, those two things are usually the same, he said. Now set a course for the Concord station at maximum speed, because we have a fight to prepare for. As the horizon's edge changed course and accelerated toward its new destination, Daniel stood alone at the viewport and watched the stars streak past like tears of light in the darkness. Somewhere out there, a Kravith champion waited for him, and the fate of humanity would be decided in a single combat that no one believed a human could survive. But Daniel Hayes had not survived 30 years in space by accepting what other people believed was possible. He had survived by being human. The Concorde Central Station was the largest structure Daniel had ever seen in his entire life, and it orbited a dying red star, like a monument to the power of civilizations that had mastered the secrets of the universe long before humans learned to make fire. The station was home to representatives from over 300 alien species, and today they had all gathered for one purpose, which was to witness what most of them considered a simple formality, the final humiliation of the young human. Species Daniel's shuttle docked at Port 17, and he stepped out into a corridor filled with beings of every shape and size imaginable. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, while others crawled on dozens of limbs or floated through the air on Wings of light glided along the floor, leaving trails of slime behind them all. Of them stopped to stare at the human who had been foolish enough to accept the Kravith challenge the Catherine Cole was waiting for him at the end of the docking corridor. And she was Earth's chief diplomat to the Concorde, and one of the smartest people Daniel had ever known. She was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and sharp green eyes that missed nothing at all. "Daniel, this is absolute madness," she said as they walked through corridors filled with curious alien observers. "Do you have any idea what you have done by accepting this challenge?" "I have an idea, yes," Daniel replied calmly. "The Kravith champion is called Zorkan, and he is 8 feet tall and weighs over 400 pounds. Catherine continued with growing frustration. "He has an exoskeleton that can withstand weapons that would tear you apart in an instant. And he has killed warriors from 47 different species. I'm aware of his record." "Then what were you thinking?" Catherine demanded as she grabbed his arm and forced him to stop walking. "Why did you accept this when you know you cannot win?" Daniel looked at her with steady eyes and spoke in a voice that carried no doubt. "I was thinking that someone had to accept or humanity would lose everything we have worked for," he said. "And I was thinking that everyone seems to underestimate humans, and that has always been a mistake." Catherine shook her head in disbelief, but she released his arm and they continued walking. "Courage is admirable, Daniel, but this is not a war where tactics and strategy can make a difference," she said. "This is single combat where strength meets strength, and the Kravith evolved on a world with twice Earth's gravity, which makes their biology simply superior for fighting. Superior in some ways, perhaps," Daniel agreed, "but not in always." Before Catherine could ask what he meant by that, a massive shadow fell over both of them and blocked out the light from the corridor ceiling. Daniel looked up and saw the towering form of Zorkan himself, flanked by 4 Kravith guards, who were each larger than any human athlete Daniel had ever seen. The champion was everything the reports had described, and somehow even more terrifying in person. Zorkan stood 8 feet tall on thick legs that ended in clawed feet that could crush stone, and his body was covered in chitinous armor, the color of dried blood that had been spilled across 100 worlds. He had 4 arms that ended in claws, capable of tearing through steel, and his face was a nightmare of sharp angles and mandibles surrounding a mouth filled with teeth designed for ripping flesh from bone. His eyes were black as the void between stars, and they studied Daniel with the cold interest of a predator examining prey that was too small to provide a satisfying meal. "So this is the human," Zorkan rumbled in a voice like grinding stone that echoed through the corridor. "I have studied your kind since the challenge was issued, and I must say I am disappointed. Is that so?" Daniel replied without any trace of fear in his voice. "Your species is soft flesh and fragile bones with no natural weapons of any kind." Zorkan continued as the alien spectators gathered to watch the confrontation. "You have no claws and no armor and no venom, and I have seen insects on my world that would pose more threat in combat. And yet here I am," Daniel said simply. Zorkan leaned down until his massive face was just inches from Daniel's, and the champion's breath smelled like copper and decay. "Tell me, little creature," the Kravith said, "do you even understand what you face in that arena?" Daniel met the alien's black eyes without flinching, and when he spoke, his voice was calm and clear. "I understand that you have won 47 challenges by being bigger and stronger than everyone you have fought," Daniel said. "And I understand that you have never faced someone who does not care about those things." Silence fell over the corridor as every alien present processed what the human had just said to the most feared warrior in the galaxy. Zorkan was still for a long moment, and then he laughed. It was a horrible scraping sound like metal being torn apart, and it echoed through the corridor until Daniel could feel it vibrating in his chest. "Brave words from a creature I could kill with a single blow," Zorkan said. I will enjoy breaking you in front of the entire Concord and showing everyone what happens to species that reach beyond their place." The champion straightened to his full height and looked Daniel with contempt. "Enjoy your final days, human," Zorkin said. "When we meet in the arena, I will make your death slow so that your entire species can watch and learn their lesson." The Kravith champion turned and walked away with his guards following behind him, and the crowd parted before him like water flowing around a stone. Catherine grabbed Daniel's arm again and pulled him into a side corridor away from the watching aliens. "Please tell me you have a plan," she said, with fear clear in her voice. "Please tell me you did not just insult the most dangerous warrior in the galaxy without having some way to back it up." Daniel looked at her and smiled in a way that made her more nervous than anything else that had happened. "I have something better than a plan, Catherine," he said. "I have 3 days to prepare and a lifetime of being underestimated." "That is not an answer, Daniel. It is the only answer I have right now," he replied. "But I promise you something, Catherine, and I want you to remember this when you watch me in that arena." "What is that?" "Humans did not become the dominant species on our planet by being the biggest or the strongest or the fastest," Daniel said. "We did it by being the most stubborn creatures that ever lived, and by refusing to give up no matter what we faced." He started walking toward the quarters that had been assigned to him, and Catherine hurried to keep up. "The Kravith think this challenge is about strength," Daniel continued. "But it is not about strength at all, and by the time Zorkin understands that, it will be too late for him." Catherine wanted to believe him, but she had seen the size of Zorkin and the cold confidence in those black eyes. She had seen the records of his previous fights where warriors twice Daniel's size had been torn apart in minutes. But she had also known Daniel Hayes for 20 years, and she had never seen him break a promise, so she said nothing more and simply walked beside him as they made their way through corridors filled with aliens who had already decided how this story would end. None of them knew that they were about to learn what it truly meant to challenge a human. The Concord provided Daniel with quarters on the station and full access to their training facilities where champions from 100 worlds had prepared for combat over thousands of years. Most warriors would have spent every moment lifting weights and practicing fighting techniques and building their bodies into weapons capable of facing the Kravith champion. Daniel did none of those things. Instead, he spent the entire first day sitting in his quarters and watching recordings on a holographic display that showed every piece of footage ever recorded of Kravith combat. His aide was a young lieutenant named Chris Bennett, who had volunteered to accompany Daniel to the station and help him prepare in any way possible. Chris watched with growing concern as Daniel played the same recordings over and over again for hours without stopping to eat or rest. "Sir," Chris finally said when he could not contain his worry any longer, "should you not be in the training facility right now and building strength for the fight?" Daniel did not look up from the holographic display where Zorkin was currently tearing apart a warrior from the Draven Collective. "Chris, come here and tell me what you see in this footage." Daniel said. The young lieutenant moved closer and studied the recording with careful attention. Footage showed Zorkin dismantling a massive reptilian warrior from the Seth Dominion, who had scales like armor and claws nearly as large as the Kravith champion's own. The Seth warrior was 7 feet tall and weighed over 300 pounds of pure muscle, and he had won 12 challenges of his own before facing Soaring, and fight lasted less than 90 seconds before the Seth lay broken on the arena floor. "I see a monster destroying his opponent in under 2 minutes," Chris said with a heavy voice. "I see power that no human could ever hope to match." "Look again," Daniel said. "Watch his movements and watch his patterns and tell me what you really see." Chris watched the recording more carefully this time and paid attention to the details rather than just the overwhelming violent jargon. Charged forward at the start of the fight using his superior mass to close the distance instantly, and he struck with all 4 arms at once, delivering devastating Blows that cracked the Seath scales like they were made of glass. The champion never retreated and never defended, because he never needed to. He's aggressive. Chris said slowly as understanding began to dawn. He attacks constantly from the very first moment and never stops until his opponent is dead. Exactly, Daniel said as he finally looked up from the display. Every single fight in his record follows the same pattern without exception. Daniel stood and stretched muscles that had grown stiff from sitting for so long. Dorkin rushes forward and overwhelms his opponent with strength and crushes them before they can react. Daniel continued, "This strategy works because everyone he has faced has tried to match him and stand their ground and trade blows. So what do you do differently?" Chris asked. Daniel smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had found the answer to a puzzle that everyone else thought was unsolvable. "I do not stand my ground," he said simply. On the second day, Daniel finally went to the training facility, but his preparation was nothing like what anyone expected from a champion preparing for combat. He did not lift weights or practice strikes or work on blocking techniques. That would be useless against Kravith claws anyway. Instead, he ran for hours. Daniel ran through the station's corridors and upstairs and through maintenance tunnels at a steady pace that never slowed. No matter how far he traveled, he practiced rolling and diving and sliding under obstacles and changing direction instantly while maintaining his speed. Catherine came to observe his training and found herself completely confused by what she was watching. "Daniel, what is this?" she asked as he completed another circuit of the training area. "You are training like a gymnast or a dancer rather than a fighter preparing for the battle of his life." Daniel stopped running and took a drink of water before answering her question. "The Kravith evolved on a world with twice Earth's gravity," he explained between steady breaths. "That made them incredibly strong, but it also made them slow to change direction because their joints are designed for power rather than flexibility." "I do not understand," Catherine said. "On their high gravity world, everything moves in straight lines because changing direction requires too much energy." Daniel continued, "Their predators charged in straight lines and their prey ran in straight lines, and so the Kravith evolved to be perfect at fighting in straight lines. But humans?" Catherine asked as she began to see where he was going. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters on a world where prey animals could change direction instantly and run through forests and across rivers and up hills," Daniel said. "We chased antelope and deer for days across changing terrain, and we learned to turn and adapt and follow no matter where our prey went." "You are going to tire him out," Catherine said with wonder in her voice. "I'm going to do what humans have always done, Catherine," Daniel replied. "I am going to refuse to die until my enemy makes a mistake and gives me an opening." That night, Daniel received an unexpected visitor in his quarters. A small alien no larger than a human child appeared at his door with silver fur covering its entire body and enormous dark eyes that seemed to hold the light of distant stars. It was a Talani, which was a species known throughout the Concord for their wisdom and their strict neutrality in all conflicts between other species. "I am Elder Vos," the creature said in a voice as soft as wind through leaves. "I have watched your kind since you first reached for the stars with your primitive rockets and your burning ambition. Why have you come to see me, Elder?" Daniel asked. "I came to tell you something important, Commander Hayes," Elder Vos said. "Something that might help you understand what you truly face in that arena." Daniel invited the Talani inside and offered the Elder a seat, which Vos accepted with a graceful nod. The Kravith believed they challenged humanity because of territorial disputes in the Orion Spur. Elder Vos began, "But the true reason is something much deeper and more dangerous." "What is the true reason?" "Fear," Elder Vos said simply. "The Kravith are afraid of your species in a way they have never been afraid of anyone before." Daniel sat across from the Elder and listened carefully. Your species has accomplished in just 2 centuries what took others 10,000 years or more. Elder Vos continued. You spread across your world and then beyond it, and then to other stars, and every step of the way you adapted and changed and grew stronger. The Talani's dark eyes seemed to hold entire galaxies as the Elder spoke. The Kravith can see the future, Commander Hayes, and in that future they see themselves becoming irrelevant as humanity rises to dominate the galaxy. Elder Vos said, this challenge is not really about the Orion Spur at all, but about stopping humanity before you become unstoppable. Daniel absorbed this information in silence for a long moment. Why are you telling me this? He finally asked. Your species is neutral in all conflicts. We are neutral in conflicts, yes, but we are not neutral about the future of this galaxy. Elder Vos replied, I have seen many species rise and fall over my long life, and I have seen empires crumble and civilizations turn to dust. The Talani leaned forward, and those ancient eyes fixed on Daniel's face. I believe, Commander Hayes, that your kind may be the ones who finally unite this fractured galaxy and bring peace to worlds that have known nothing but war for millennia. Elder Vos said, but that future can only happen if you survive tomorrow. Do you have any advice for me? Daniel asked. Elder Vos was silent for a moment before answering. Only this. The Elder said, the Kravith have never lost because they have never faced anyone who fights the way humans fight, and they do not understand that true strength is not found in muscles or claws, but in the will to continue when all seems lost. The Talani rose and moved toward the door. Show them, Commander Hayes. Elder Vos said, show the entire galaxy what it means to be human. And then the Elder was gone, and Daniel was alone with his thoughts and the weight of everything that would happen when the sun rose on the arena. The arena was a massive sphere at the very heart of the station with transparent walls that allowed thousands of spectators to observe from every possible angle as if they were watching from inside a giant bubble floating in space. The dying red star provided a bloody glow that filled the arena with light the color of old wounds and forgotten wars. Representatives from every species in the Concord had gathered to witness what was about to happen, and the noise of their voices and calls and vibrations filled the air like thunder rolling across an alien sky. Most of them had come to witness humanity's defeat, and to see the young species put in its place by the might of the Kravith Empire. Some had come hoping for a miracle, even though they did not truly believe one was possible. Daniel entered the arena from the eastern gate, wearing only simple combat attire that consisted of lightweight pants and a fitted shirt and soft boots designed for traction on the smooth arena floor. He carried no weapons because the terms of the challenge allowed only natural abilities. He looked small and fragile and utterly alone in the vast space of the Aranezerkan. Entered from the western gate, and the Kravith spectators erupted in rhythmic chanting that celebrated their champion and promised death to his enemy. The champion's massive form cast long shadows across the arena floor as he walked forward with the confidence of a predator who had never known defeat. His chitinous armor gleamed in the red light, and his forearms flexed with power that could crush stone, and his black eyes fixed on Daniel with hungry anticipation. The Valkyrie Arbiter's voice echoed through the sphere like the tolling of a great bell. This combat will continue until one participant is unable to continue or surrenders. The Arbiter announced, there are no other rules, and there will be no interference, and may the will of the cosmos determine the outcome. A tone sounded through the arena, signaling the beginning of the combat. Serkan charged the Kravith champion, crossed the distance between them in just seconds as his massive legs propelled him forward with terrifying speed, and all 4 of his arms raised high for a devastating strike that would end the fight before it truly began. Daniel watched him come, and watched those claws descending, and watched what everyone else in the arena believed was certain death approaching, and then he moved at The last possible moment, Daniel dove to the side and rolled under Zorkan's guard and came up behind the champion before the alien could even register what had happened. The Kravith's claws struck empty air where Daniel had been standing just a heartbeat before, and the champion's momentum carried him forward several more steps before he could stop. Daniel was already moving again and sprinting to the far side of the arena with a speed that surprised everyone watching. The crowd fell into stunned silence as Zorkan turned around slowly, and confusion was evident in his posture and the twitching of his mandibles. In 47 fights, no opponent had ever simply avoided him like that. The champion charged again with even greater fury. Daniel waited until the last moment and then dove and then ran again. And again the pattern repeated as Zorkan attacked and Daniel evaded, and the chase continued across every corner of the arena. For 20 minutes, this continued without pause as the Kravith champion grew increasingly frustrated, and his movements became wilder and less controlled with each failed attack. The crowd began to murmur as they watched something they had never seen before in a challenge. "Stand and fight, coward!" Zorkan roared with rage that shook the transparent walls of the arena. "Face me like a warrior instead of running like prey." Daniel stopped running. He stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard but steady, and looked at his opponent with calm eyes that held no fear. "I am facing you," Daniel said in a voice loud enough for every spectator to hear clearly. "I am facing you the human way," Zorkan snarled, but Daniel continued speaking. "You see, Zorkan, your species conquered your world through strength and overwhelming force," Daniel said. "But mine conquered Earth through something different, and something you have never faced before." "And what is that?" the champion demanded. "Endurance," Daniel replied. "Our ancestors would chase prey animals until those animals collapsed from exhaustion, because humans can run longer than almost any creature on our planet." Daniel began to circle slowly as he spoke. "We hunted the fastest animals on Earth, not by being faster, but by never ever stopping." He continued, "We would follow our prey for days across mountains and rivers and deserts, and we would still be running when they finally fell." Zorkan charged once more with murder in his eyes, but this time something was different, and everyone in the arena could see it. The champion's movements were slower than before, and his breathing was labored and heavy, and his legs did not carry him with the same explosive power. 20 minutes of constant maximum exertion was taking its toll, even on his enhanced Kravith biology. Daniel evaded the first strike by ducking under a claw that passed over his head, but instead of running away, he moved closer to the champion. He drove his fist into the joint of Zorkan's lower right arm with precise accuracy. It was not a powerful blow by any measure, but it did not need to be because it hit the nerve cluster, exactly where Daniel had studied during his hours of watching combat footage. The arm went completely limp and hung useless at the champion's side. Zorkan howled in surprise and pain as he realized what had happened. He swung with his remaining 3 arms, but his movements were sluggish now, and Daniel wove between them like water flowing around stones in a river. Another precise strike to another joint, and another arm fell useless. Then a third arm went limp as Daniel continued his systematic attack on the weak points he had identified. The Kravith champion stumbled as his legs began to tremble with exhaustion and pain, and the crowd watched in absolute disbelief as the greatest warrior in the galaxy began to fall. Daniel circled him now, and he was no longer running, but walking with careful patience as he watched for any opening. "Yield," Daniel said quietly. "Never." Zorkan gasped through mandibles that could barely form words. "The Kravith do not yield to anyone." "Then let me tell you how this ends," Daniel replied in a voice that carried no anger or hatred, but only simple truth. "You have no functioning arms left, and your legs are failing, and in about 3 minutes you will collapse from exhaustion." He paused and looked at the champion with something that might have been respect. "I can wait," Daniel said. Humans are very good at waiting. Zorkin tried to respond, but his breath came in ragged gasps that prevented speech. His mighty form swayed like a tree about to fall in a storm. Entire arena held its breath as they watched the impossible unfold before their eyes, and then slowly and impossibly the greatest champion the Kravith had ever produced fell to his knees on the arena floor. I yield, Zorkin whispered in a voice that barely carried beyond his own body. The arena exploded into absolute chaos. Some spectators screamed in disbelief, while others shouted that there must have been cheating or deception of some kind. Others, particularly the representatives of species that had suffered under Kravith aggression, erupted in wild celebration. Daniel walked forward through the noise and the fury, and to everyone's complete amazement, he offered his hand to the fallen champion. You fought with honor, Daniel said. Your strength was everything they said it would be and more. Zorkin looked at the extended hand for a very long moment as his black eyes studied the human who had defeated him. What are you? The Kravith finally asked. Daniel helped him to his feet and supported some of the champion's weight as the alien's legs threatened to give out. I am human, Daniel said simply, and now the galaxy knows what that means. The Concord chamber was filled with representatives from 300 species, and every single one of them was silent as the Vulthari Arbiter stood before the assembly to announce the official results of the challenge. Under the terms of Article 7 of the Founding Charter, the Arbiter declared in a voice that echoed through the vast chamber, the challenge issued by the Kravith Empire has been decided in favor of humanity. A murmur rippled through the crowd, but no one dared to speak. The Kravith Empire is therefore required to cede all claims to the Orion Spur permanently and to pay reparations to Earth for 100 standard cycles, as specified in the original terms. The Arbiter paused and looked out over the assembled representatives. Let it be recorded that on this day, a human champion faced the greatest warrior of the Kravith Empire in single combat and emerged victorious through means that no one anticipated. The official announcement was complete, but everyone in the chamber knew that what happened next would matter far more than any legal declaration. The Kravith ambassador rose from the Empire section and walked slowly across the chamber floor toward where Daniel stood with Catherine and Chris in the human delegation's area. Every eye in the room followed the ambassador's progress. Commander Hayes, the ambassador said in a voice that carried no hostility, but something that might have been grudging respect. The Empire recognizes your victory as legitimate and binding. Thank you, Ambassador, Daniel replied with a slight bow. But we would speak with you privately before we depart from this station. The ambassador continued. There are matters to discuss that should not be shared with the entire Concord. Daniel glanced at Catherine, who gave him a small nod. I will hear what you have to say, Daniel agreed. The ambassador led him through a side passage to a small observation room that looked out over the dying red star. To Daniel's surprise, Zorkan was already there waiting for them. The champion's wounded arms were wrapped in regeneration sleeves that glowed with soft blue light. As Kravith medical technology worked to repair the nerve damage Daniel had inflicted, what you did in that arena, the ambassador began without any preamble, was something we have never witnessed in all our history of combat. I simply fought the only way I could, Daniel said. No, Zorkan interrupted with his grinding voice. You did something far more significant than that, Commander Hayes. The champion stepped forward, and Daniel noticed that the hostility that had filled those black eyes before the fight was completely gone. You did not defeat me through superior strength, or advanced technology, or any advantage that we could have predicted. Zorkan continued. You defeated me by being human, and by fighting in a way that our species could not anticipate or counter. I meant no disrespect to you or your people, Daniel said. I did what I had to do to protect my species. That is precisely why we wish to speak with you, the ambassador said. The Kravath official exchanged a meaningful glance with Zorkin before continuing. For centuries, we have expanded our empire through challenges such as this one, the ambassador explained. We believed ourselves to be the supreme warriors of the galaxy, and we used that belief to dominate every species we encountered. Your victory has forced us to reconsider many things about ourselves and our place in the cosmos. The ambassador admitted. Zoran moved to stand beside the ambassador and spoke again. I have spent my entire life training for combat, the champion said. I believed that I understood perfectly what it meant to be a warrior, and I thought strength and power were everything. The massive alien looked at Daniel with those black eyes that now held something like admiration. But you showed me something different, Commander Hayes. Zorkin continued. You showed me that true strength is not found in muscle or claw, but in the refusal to surrender, and in the will to continue fighting when all hope seems lost. The Kravath Empire wishes to propose something unprecedented, the ambassador said. I am listening, Daniel replied. Instead of the reparations specified in the terms of the challenge, we offer an alliance between our peoples, the ambassador said. Our military strength combined with human adaptability and determination could accomplish things that neither species could achieve alone. Daniel was silent for a moment as he considered the magnitude of what was being offered. We would have our warriors train alongside yours, the ambassador continued. We would share our technology and our knowledge of the galaxy, and together we could face threats that would destroy either of our civilizations. Individually, that decision is not mine to make alone, Daniel said. I am just a commander in our fleet. Then carry our proposal to your leaders on Earth, the ambassador replied. And know this, Commander Hayes, because it is important that you understand the significance of what we are offering. The ambassador's voice took on a weight that Daniel could feel pressing against him. The Kravath have never asked for alliance with anyone, the ambassador said. In all our history, we have only demanded submission from those weaker than ourselves, and we have never considered any species to be our equal. That we ask this of humans speaks to what you have shown us today, Zorkin added. You have earned our respect in a way that no one else ever has. 1 month later, Daniel stood in the Great Hall of the Earth Parliament as the representatives of humanity voted to ratify the Human-Kravath Alliance. It was the first mutual defense pact in Concord history, and it changed everything about humanity's position in the galaxy. Other species that had watched Daniel's victory began reaching out to Earth as well because they had seen something in that arena that gave them hope. They had seen that the old powers of the galaxy could be challenged and defeated by those willing to fight in new ways. Dr. Catherine Cole found Daniel on the observation deck of Horizon's Edge as they prepared to leave the station and return to Earth. You know what you have started here today, she said as she stood beside him and watched the stars. I want to fight, Daniel replied simply. You did so much more than that, Catherine said. You showed the entire galaxy that humans do not play by anyone else's rules and that we find our own way forward, no matter what obstacles stand before us. She paused and looked at him with eyes that held wonder and pride. You showed them that we endure. She continued. The Talani elder was right, and the Kravath challenged us because they feared what we would become. And now? Daniel asked. Catherine smiled, and it was the smile of someone who could see a bright future unfolding before her. Now they want to become it with us, she said. In the years that followed, humanity's influence spread throughout the galaxy, but not through conquest or intimidation, the way the Kravath and other empires had. Expanded instead, humanity spread through example and through showing species after species what it truly meant to be human. They showed the galaxy what it meant to adapt and to persevere, and to refuse to accept defeat no matter how overwhelming the odds might seem. Human-Kravath Alliance grew into something larger as More species joined and asked to train with human warriors and learn the secrets of human determination. And when future histories were written about the moment everything changed in the galaxy, they would all point to a single combat in an arena. Orbiting a dying red star, they would tell the story of a day when a soft and fragile human stood alone against a giant and proved to everyone watching that the will to survive is the greatest weapon in the entire universe. They challenged a human he conquered, and nothing in the galaxy was ever the same again.